As the saying goes, there is no rest for the wicked. And so we found ourselves approaching our next destination with an unusual mixture of excitement and trepidation. On arrival, we were immediately greeted by some familiar faces, such as cattle egrets and black kites. But even the ostensibly familiar species are still subtly altered by their environment. And some, such as the straw-necked ibis, are commonly known as the farmer's friend because they eat land-based insects and invertebrates that might otherwise harm the crops. On the other hand, the Raja shelduck, despite being almost completely unrelated to the straw-necked ibis, apart from the fact that they're both birds, has remarkably similar coloration. But one curious detail about the Raja shelduck is that during the rainy season, the males can often become quite aggressive and have been observed attacking their mates if they are cooped up for too long. And another more or less familiar species that again shows this curious white breast and neck coloration is the forest kingfisher, which, as the name suggests, tends to be found in tropical or subtropical forests across its range, although it may also be found in mangrove forest or swampland, depending on resource availability. These strikingly blue kingfishers are about half again as large as the common or Eurasian kingfisher. However, they don't weigh significantly more, with both species topping out at about 45 grams. Which makes this next individual something of a giant in the family, and hopefully gives some indication of where we're filming, and perhaps why we're so concerned. As we are, of course, in Australia, specifically currently Darwin, in the Northern Territory, and two things everyone knows about the wildlife in Australia: it is A, beautiful, and B, deadly. This absolute monster of a kingfisher is therefore the blue-winged kookaburra, which can be a little over 40 centimetres in length and can weigh up to 330 grams. This does leave them as relatively slow flyers, so they are comparatively easy prey for red goshawks and rufous owls, and are also quite vulnerable to impacts with cars. Thankfully, and despite reports to the contrary, not every species in Australia is monstrously large or nightmarishly attempting to kill you. Some, such as this varied triller, want nothing more in life than to hop through the forests and woodlands of their home, eating as many insects as they can find, and making quite a pleasant rolling call as they do so. Despite appearances, the spangled drongo, with its dark iridescent feathers and crimson-red eyes, also doesn't want to harm you, and can in fact be tamed when it visits urban areas by throwing small pieces of raw meat into the air. Like many other in the family, the spangled drongo is an excellent mimic, and will incorporate practically any sound from its environment into its song. The one unique sound they do seem to possess has been described as sounding like a sneeze, although we weren't fortunate enough to record this. For a bird which looks as savage as it acts, however, the magpie lark is certainly one of the prime contenders. Widespread across Australia, with the exception of some desert regions, they are notably aggressive, and have been observed chasing off significantly larger predators such as magpies, ravens, kookaburras, and even wedge-tailed eagles to defend their nesting area, and they will also quite happily attack their own reflection. They're also known to engage in swooping, the process of attacking humans who are no threat whatsoever to their nesting sites. The masked lapwing is also a known swooper, although thankfully for all of these birds, we were outside of the breeding season and thus avoided this particular behaviour. Rainbow bee-eaters apparently have similar opinions on the safety of Australian wildlife to us. Although they are immune to the stings of bees and wasps, when they do capture a bee for which they have a marked preference in their diet, they will rub the stinger against a branch to remove it. Unlike the normally solitary rainbow bee-eater, many of the finches of Australia are incredibly gregarious. And considering that their diet is almost exclusively comprised of grains and seeds, their morphology is remarkably similar, perhaps unsurprisingly, to common sparrows found across Europe, although their calls are notably distinct from one another. One of the more curious exceptions to the sociability of Australian finches is the crimson finch. Its common name is obviously a reference to its bright red coloration. However, two common nicknames across northern Australia are bloodfinch and killer finch. Their diet primarily consists of seeds and grasses, although they are also known to take insects on occasion. However, both male and female birds are incredibly aggressive towards intruders, and this aggression pays little regard to species, age, coloration or body size. As a result, crimson finches are relatively spread out, with only 4 to 5 breeding pairs per 100 metre area. However, a potential practical upshot of this behaviour is their very high survival rates, of up to 96% survival to adulthood. Considering its vibrant coloration, our next spot was peculiarly difficult to identify at first. This species is the blue-faced honeyeater, and as I'm sure you've noticed, this individual does not have a blue face. Thankfully, we're not alone in this difficulty. Throughout the bird's 200 or so years of history in science, it has been variously known as the blue-eared or blue-faced grackle, the blue-cheeked bee-eater, or the blue-cheeked thrush. It is only the adults that possess the blue patches of bare skin on their face. Our final bird spot in Darwin is kookaburra, or the orange-footed megapode. Around the size of a chicken, it is referred to by many Darwinians as the bush chook or bush chicken, and is common in suburban gardens across the region. It took us some time, in fact, to decide what this individual was doing. We assumed at first it was digging for grubs. However, the sheer size of the hole makes this unlikely. Instead, it is very likely that this is a nest in the early stages of construction, as the piles of leaf litter and other debris that often make up orange-footed megapode nests may reach up to 4.5 metres in height and 9 metres in diameter. Of course, without a significant number of reptiles and other disquieting beasties, it wouldn't be Australia. Although, again, despite the historical representation of everything on Australia being toxic, venomous or otherwise inclined to kill you, many, such as this common keelback, are in fact quite harmless to humans. Although, full disclosure, we were initially quite concerned because of its resemblance to the taipan, one of the most venomous snakes in the world. However, as we kept well clear of them and were able to closely examine the footage afterwards, we were relieved to discover that these are definitely non-venomous. The common keelback feeds mainly on amphibians and small lizards, and otherwise its only notable feature is that it is one of the few snakes that can eat cane toads, up to a certain size, without being harmed by their venom. By contrast, the Merton's water monitor, which occupies much of the same range as the common keelback, is significantly threatened by the spread of the cane toads through this territory. This species of water monitor is far less discriminating in its diet and has no such immunity to the cane toad's venom. One of our more surprising spots around Darwin was the black flying fox, or black fruit bat as it may be known. One of fewer than 400 species of mammal native to Australia, the black flying fox has a wingspan of over a metre and has been known to travel up to 50 kilometres in a night in the search of food. One of the species that resolutely resisted any identification methods is this bagworm, which could be the larva of any one of the 1,350 species of bag moth. In contrast, this clear-winged swallowtail was very easy to identify on account of being both swallow-tailed and possessed of clear wings. Curiously known by Australians as big greasy, they are in fact the closest living relatives of the South American Ureades butterflies. Our final insect spot in Darwin are these, the green tree ants, which may also be known as weaver ants. Their nests are made from leaves woven together using the silk produced by the ant larvae, an impressive feat of engineering, and a single colony may have several nests per tree over multiple trees in an area, with one recorded instance of a colony occupying 151 nests distributed over 12 trees.